Welcome to the Shamelessly Ambitious podcast. This is episode 139. And I have feelings. You're probably like, Ash, when do you not have feelings? I have feelings right now. I have feelings. This is officially the very last podcast episode that I will be recording in our Texas home. So it's definitely going to come out after we have already left because we leave tomorrow. We leave tomorrow. And I decided to record one last episode in my office, this office that I so deliberately and intentionally designed. Behind me, you've got to, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see this beautiful wall that I had put in with shelves, and you'll see pictures of my family and I in Costa Rica. The actual theme, I always create kind of like a theme in each room, albeit every single room is black, white, and brown because your girl has a brand and she sticks to it. But I like to have a little theme. Our kitchen was very Italian related. So again, still black, white, and brown. But we had pictures of Italy and just the vibe was Italy. And so here, the vibe is Costa Rica in this office. And the reason why I chose Costa Rica for this office was because I became a whole new person in Costa Rica when we lived there for about, how long was it? It was almost 4 months that we lived in Costa Rica. And I always say that it was like the massive perspective shift that I never knew I always needed. Because before moving there was a lot of beliefs and narratives that I carried around what I could and could not accomplish in my life, or what I needed to do. In fact, we went to Costa Rica originally just to live there for the summer and ended up within just a few, I mean, I want to say days, a few short days, deciding like, oh no, we are digital nomads and I don't care what we have to do, but we're not going back to the US, at least for the time. And part of that was because, we decided the summer, because even though I've always wanted to travel and travel a lot and travel with my kids, the idea of traveling full time was just so out of reach. It was like, who in their right mind thinks that they can take 3 children out into the world, travel full time, still be able to pay for everything, be able to live your bougie life self, homeschool, build a business? Like, it's impossible. It's impossible. At least that's what I told myself. And so within just a couple days, really, in Costa Rica, I was like, it's not impossible. I am so capable. Well, look at what I can do. And then, of course, being in Costa Rica, in fact, leading up to Costa Rica, I made so many pivots and shifts in my business in order to customize how I was doing things so that it was sustainable while traveling. Like, I knew like my income can't shift. In fact, I'd love for it to grow, but I'm going to be with my kids 24/7. My husband was working when we were in Costa Rica, which is going to be very similar to this next nomadic journey. Is I'm taking on the brunt of all the kid stuff. Of course, he is the most helpful, extraordinary man that's ever walked this earth. So he's so helpful, but he's got a job and he has to work more traditional hours. And so I took on all of it. And so I had to be really creative and I was so innovative and I thought outside the box of like how I could do things, and everything fucking worked. Everything worked. God, it was just crazy. And I really relate this back to like being in my highest level self, right? Like I was living my best life, and I say was, but I am now too. It just, in that moment, like I actually understood what people meant when they said like calibrate to a higher level and a higher level will calibrate to you, right? It's kind of that that thing that like the industry shares, which it's so cringy because it's like so many people are saying it who I just don't necessarily want to listen to. But also it's so, so true, which is like you have to be the energetic match for what it is that you're calling in. If you're desiring more money, better relationships, the love of your life, maybe you don't have that person, no matter what you're desiring, if you're not the living, walking, talking embodiment of the person who can hold that, like has the capacity, is living that life, then you're never going to have it. And so my greatest strategy to date has always been like calibrate to her. Who is the woman who has, X, Y, and Z, all these things that I would like to have in my life? Who is that woman? And the more that I can be like her in any given moment, the more I can magnetize that life to me, right? This is the art of manifestation. In Costa Rica was this experience where it was so easy. Like I just became her, like I landed in Costa Rica, I stepped on the jungle and was like, bam, I'm that bitch. And it was just so cool. It's so cool. And I feel like, now I have this beautiful perspective of at that time, all these things were happening really naturally. And then I sort of forgot the essence of it, of like living my best life. And then everything comes from it because then, and I've shared this story, right? That I I went into the very next year when we decided to land for a while with this like, oh, if I could do that with that amount of hours, imagine what I could do with this amount of hours. And I kind of forgot like the truth of it is like time, while valuable, so valuable, one of the most valuable commodities that we have, it's actually not the greatest exchange valued to the things that we want. We always think like if I had more time or if I had more money, right? If I had more of these things, then I can have, right? It's the when I, then I perspective. And that's a very dangerous place to live. Very dangerous. I help a lot of clients out of this and I help myself out of this often because it's not always that easy. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. So I started with, here's my office and I'm leaving. I'm so sad. And it's okay. It's just very bittersweet. You know, we're about to embark on another extraordinary adventure. And I have no question that it's going to change everything in the most beautiful way. And I'm sad. I'm a little sad. You know, we built this house, we made it a home. I'm looking across my office and there's these really great pictures of the kids and I running on the beach in Costa Rica. Again, Costa Rica theme, hello. And there's some sadness. Also, I have so much to do. It's not even funny. Like, if I'm being really honest, I have no freaking right to be recording this podcast episode right now. I have my entire house to pack up and leave in less than 24 hours. Like we have to walk out of this house. Actually, we have the people who are buying the house coming through for a walkthrough tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. and it is 4:30 p.m. and I haven't started. You're probably like, what the fuck? How is that even possible? I don't know. Like I don't know. I am crazed. I'm crazed. I'll make it work. I always do, but I am crazy. As soon as I literally stop this recording, I have to pack up my whole office. But I kept it all together for you so I could have this beautiful aesthetic and tell you this beautiful story about Costa Rica. I'm off my rocker, people. I'm off my rocker. Okay, perspective. Perspective. So all this circles back around to I was having a garage sale and so many great people came through the garage sale. We sold all of our belongings. So the person who's buying our house is buying all the furniture, but all the excess stuff, the decor and stuff that we weren't keeping because we're keeping some things, we sold at the garage sale. And so there's this woman there, and my kids were just savages. You know, they're just running amok, being savages. They're eating popsicles. The popsicles are melting because it's 175 degrees in Texas. And so they're just plopping onto the ground. And then, you know, 1,000 crazy mangy bugs are coming. It's just chaos, pure chaos. And so she's relating to me and belonging to me and being so sweet. And it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you're doing this. You're so amazing. You know, I can't believe you're going to travel with them. I know. She's really thinking, how's this bitch going to do it? Because these kids are savage. And maybe also like slightly thinking like, girl, you are biting off way more than you can chew, but that's okay. But she's just relating to me. And we're talking, I was saying my daughter was just on a trip to Arizona to see my mom and she was gone. And it was so crazy how much simpler just having two kids were. Like 3 to 2 was wild. And now back to 3, it's wild again. And so we went down this whole rabbit hole of conversations about the perspective that you never like, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And I think we can apply this to any parts of our lives, right? And how, you know, when I didn't have kids, I never had enough time. I had so many things to do. My life was just crazy all the time. And then I had a kid and I had the one kid and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And I'm looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, that childless version of me had no idea how much time she had. What an idiot. Like she should have done more. And then I was like, this is so hard. And then I had 2 and I was like, oh my God, that one child version of me had no idea how easy it is to have one kid. And then I had 3 and the list goes on and on. So we're talking about this. We're just going down this beautiful conversation about how you just never know until you're in it. And then you're in it and you're like, holy shit, that version before was easier. And so we were talking about it and I was like, and we could probably say the same to ourselves from a 20 plus version of us, 20 years from now, there's a version of us who's going, oh, you sweet little things. Talking about how things are hard or crazy or savage. And really you're living the time of your life. And we all hear this, right? This is not brand new news to you, but it really hit home this reminder of the perspective shift. And I actually, in that conversation was like, you know what? I didn't realize it until now, but I've been anchoring that in for my health journey. So as you know, I've been on a health journey for several months now. I'm down 30 pounds. I'm feeling amazing, but I'm definitely at that part where progress seems to have stalled a little bit. Once we get a little, I'm going to say normalcy, and then I'm going to laugh at myself because there's nothing normal about what we're doing. But I feel like I'm going to have to switch something up because maybe I've been doing the same thing for too long. I'm not sure. But over the past I don't know, I want to say like 5 to 6 weeks, I'm pretty stable at the same weight and not really seeing many differences, which is hard because when I first started, I changed so much about my habits that I was like really seeing the difference. And that's so motivating. It's so motivating. Anything is good when it's good. I don't care if it's your business and you're selling something and it's working and you're like, I'm a fucking boss. Like, I've never been so good at anything in my life. And then it's not working within one moment and you're like, I should quit. I'm not good at this. I'm terrible at it. Right. Same can happen with health and wellness and anything, right? Like, I swear in marriage, it's like one day I'm like, man, we are the best married couple ever. Like, everybody should strive to be just like us. We're so amazing. And the next day I'm like, where exactly do people find divorce attorneys? And I'm laughing because I wish that was a joke. And I have no desire to divorce my husband. I am obsessed with him through and through. But those feelings of just like, he could be my best friend and my worst enemy. And it can happen in the same day. And I think this is the thing. And so I've been really using this tactic, particularly in my morning workouts when I'm just like, oh, I could just not do this because it's not working, except for I say to myself, there's a version of you 10 years from now that's like, man, to have that body again, to have that strength again, to have that stamina again. Ooh, I would give anything. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, right? Gosh, that's so true. Because I've done that. I mean, I know you have. I've done the like, oh my gosh, pre-baby body. What a box, And yet that version of me was like, oh, I'm so fat. I don't like these parts of me. Not that that's not valid because it is. And I validate everybody and all their feelings and all their things. But also, perspective is a funny, fickle thing, isn't it? And so that's been sort of my anchor point every single day with how I eat, with like my routine, my habits, how I take care of myself, even in my business. Like, there is a version of me that is so fond of this version of me and just thinks, man, what a baddie. What a baddie. And so I've been leaning into that a lot. And I just wanted to bring that conversation here, that the value of that perspective shift. And so I was having this conversation inside my mastermind because I just have conversation after conversation about these things. And I had a client who shared her own experiences. I'm not going to share because it's her story, but where she had a massive, massive perspective shift and was like, man, I was wanting this one thing. And then there was a possibility of that thing. And then I was like, wait, I don't think I'm ready for that thing. And all these things happen. And I said, you received the gift of perspective. You received the gift of perspective. And you can choose to hold on to it, or you could choose to fly right past it. And I said that because, to intentionally, like what I'm doing, to anchor back into constantly and intentionally this, like, there's a version of me that it takes effort. It takes intention. I don't know how many times I can say that word. It takes intention, right? And so it's so different than those massive perspective shifts. I know we've all been there where, the bigger, harder ones, especially in this world now of social media and the social media world where, in truth, and I say this a lot, we are taking in content at an inhumane level. Like, we shouldn't be able to know as much as we know because it's too vast. And I've been there where I'm scrolling and then I see somebody share a story about a loved one that's passed, their partner, their child, a good friend. And instantly you want to go squeeze your baby or tell your husband or wife or whomever how much you love them, or, run and call that friend. Those are those perspective shifts, and they're gifts. They're gifts. Because at the end of the day, when we live in a when I, then I perspective, we are missing out on so much goodness right now. That's right now in this moment. And so we're talking about this inside the mastermind. And I said, I love to apply this to anything that I do. And I gave the example of investments, so like investing in something. I choose not to focus on where will this take me, which is ass backwards to how I often tell people to put their sales pages. Not entirely, but of course, when you are selling something, you want to be able to paint the picture of the results, the ROI, like what happens afterwards, But I personally don't want to make decisions or investments from a state of where will it take me, because I don't want to live in that constant, like, when I get there, then when I make this amount of money, then I'll be that person. When I, whatever the case may be, when I lose all this weight, then I'll be a better wife. When I feel better about this, I'll do this. I don't really want that to be my entire focus. Maybe 80-20. Let's apply the 80-20 rule here. I want 80% of my focus to be on how will this investment make my life right now richer? And I think this is for me why I think that community and connection and like actual real life belonging inside of programs is so invaluable, honestly, because I want to make your life richer now. Yes, I want to promise you results and I want to help you get those results, but I don't want your entire life focused on where you're going. I want your life focused on where you are now and those rich, deep, beautiful connections and conversations and like cup filling, energy igniting moments that we all so desperately crave right now. And so I started to apply this to every part of my life, including, of course, like going nomadic. It was like, I want a life that is rich in experience and presence. And I know for me, and this isn't for everybody, but for me, cultivating that richness and that presence has a lot to do with adventure and travel. My son asked me the other day, we were on a walk and he was like on a walk to school. But he asked me the other day, he said, Mom, what's one thing that you could do and do it over and over and over again and like want to do it again, like never want to stop? And I really gave it some good thought and was like, traveling, like seeing new places, meeting new people, exploring, like going out with no direction whatsoever and just walking around forever. That is my like, oof. It's funny because really the reason why he asked this is his response was, well, mine is video games. So how can I get more video game time? So for anybody who was like, oh my gosh, her kids are so wise. And look at that question he asked her and how great. He was really just trying to manipulate me into giving him more video game time. But the question in and of itself was very, very beautiful. And honestly, this is where I'm like, oh my God, you're just like me, because that was me as a kid, man. I just knew how to take something and just twist it to whatever was going to give me the greatest value. Anyways, I digress. So my intent behind this podcast episode is a reminder of the perspective shifts, the power of a perspective shift, and that invitation to reflect on a few things, right? One, who do you get to be that's going to magnify and manifest the desires of your heart? Is the version of you that's making a shit ton of money and super present with her family, is that version of you sleeping in and not eating well and scrolling social media all day? Probably not. So if you're doing those things, maybe there's a shift in your future, right? So maybe you can stop and ask yourself, who am I as that person, right? So that's one, because it creates more richness in your day to day, as opposed to believing all the things that I desire are on the other side of this. You're going, no, they're fucking right here. And I'm here for it. And I will settle for nothing less than right now, this moment, being in it. Oof. So good. It's so good. So that's one side. The other side is just the reminder of perspectives. I wanted to remind you of how these instantaneous perspective shifts can be so powerful. And yet we don't tend to cultivate that on our own on a day to day. And so my invitation to you is to cultivate that. What is that future version of you saying? Is there like, oh man, if only I remembered how hot my body was. And so I had sex with my husband more often back then, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. I just made that up. You know what I mean though? Like that's what brought us to this. Like, yeah, we could stay here and I can see where our future would go and we'd be fine. And we could make great friends. In fact, we did, and great connections and community. And we could have a really great life here. I know that. We could have a really rich life, living outside the norm, excluding ourselves from what everybody else is doing, not leaving anything at the altar of belonging, if you listen to one of our last episodes, and ultimately choosing now, richness now, right? Rather than then. It's so easy to live in a then period rather than a right now. So yeah, in the investments I make, the decisions I make, the way that I show up in my life, I've been really, really honing in on this perspective shift. How can you live right now? The richest, most vibrant, magnificent life ever. Therefore, collecting so much more as a result, attracting, magnifying so much more as a result, right? What kind of perspective shifts do you need to be a little bit more right here? I love these kind of conversations. I freaking love them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my antics. And please pray for me, although it'll be a little in the future, that I get through this move and out onto the road. And I can't believe it. I'm so stinking excited.